Welcome, everyone, to the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. So happy to have you on this Friday, September 22nd, where we'll be flying with none other than Jack Rouse. We'll get started right at the top of the hour.
Here's Jack.
To those of you just joining us, welcome to the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. Excited to have you here on our 28th episode or 28th passenger. We'll get started right at the top of the hour. Welcome to Zeitgeist Design and Production. I'm Becky Kiefer, Studio Director. Time travel is the ultimate immersive experience. Trends like VR and AR pale in comparison to the notion of sailing across the seas of time and space and reliving history or exploring the fascinating world of tomorrow. Here in the Zeitgeist Creative Studio, imagination rules and time is always of the essence. This is where immersion artists Ryan Harmon and Jolan Cicero study the past and spin the present envisioning the future of location-based entertainment, or what we like to call UXIRL, user experiences in real life. Now in its third year, the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast offers a sneak peek behind the themes. Each month, we move you without a ride system, inviting one incredibly talented and influential colleague aboard our time machine. We set the controls for milestone moments in that person's career and attempt to unravel the mystery of what makes a guest experience timely yet timeless. And because we're live, you can tap questions into the chat box and our passenger will answer them after the hour-long journey. Climbing aboard our time machine today is a leader amongst leaders, the founder and namesake of Cincinnati's Jack Rouse Associates, now JRA, part of RWS Global, Jack Rouse. A man of endless curiosity, Jack is responsible for helping to establish legitimate theater and opera in Cincinnati, as well as a college for the performing arts. When he wasn't overseeing live entertainment for Kings Island, creating brand experiences for Volkswagen or Coca-Cola, developing museums like the Underground Railroad Freedom Center, or building theme parks like Ferrari World or Australia's Wonderland, Jack was riding his Harley-Davidson tens of thousands of miles across America. It's now my pleasure to introduce our time machine pilots, Zeitgeist President and Chief Creative Officer Ryan Harmon, and Zeitgeist Executive Vice President and Chief Art Director, Jolan Cicero, along with a man who was one of the few founding members of the Themed Entertainment Association who had never worked for Disney, Universal, or any other design firm, Jack Rouse.
Here we are, we're back.
Wow, we just came. It was 1972. Ryan is such a concert now.
I am.
He said, well, we're going to be in Ohio anyway.
Right.
And talking to Jack. So let's
Right.
go listen to David Bowie.
Right, in Columbus, kicking off his amazing Ziggy Stardust tour.
Yeah.
But was he a man or a woman?
I don't
know, but
it
he was ahead of his
doesn't
time.
matter.
Jesus, that was
Anyway.
an experience.
But as long as we're in Ohio,
Yeah,
let's get on here with Jack. Boy, I am excited to be here with you today. As Becky just said, most of the people I've known in the industry were Universal or Disney or whatever.
Right.
And that's what's so great about this time machine. It takes us to places with people that I would have never experienced otherwise.
Well, I've had a chance to work with Jack on a few occasions, usually a late night phone call. Hey, Ryan, can you meet me in Miami on Tuesday?
Without the time machine.
Without the time machine. But Jack is very wise in that he knows that writers are imperative to the creation of themed entertainment experiences. And I'm very thankful, Jack, that I got a couple opportunities to work with you on some fun projects. And here we are decades later. And let's set the time machine. Let's start in Danville, Kentucky in 1957. And it looks like a very young you with dark hair at the Pioneer Playhouse. What's going on here?
Nothing worth printing, I assure you. No, the Pioneer Playhouse was a little community theater in Billings, Montana.
Oh, Billings, Montana. I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, and community in every sense of the word. And
I
think my high school speech teacher and his wife started it, and so I don't know. I decided for a couple of summers to be in show business and play the piano and overachieve at acting.
Oh, wow. Oh, so you were a performer. You weren't behind the scenes.
Momentarily.
Okay. So you were born in Billings, Montana, and then you went to school in chemistry, right?
Well, yeah, actually I was born in Tyler, Texas, but who cares?
Oh, Tyler, Texas. Okay.
Yeah, my undergraduate degree was in chemistry. I was going to go to med school. And then I realized I was probably going to med school because my family wanted me to go to med school. And so that didn't work out. So I substituted an MD for the other kind of doctor.
The PhD. So then your family moved to Madison, Wisconsin, the bridges of.
Well, I taught after I got my doctorate in Ann Arbor. I taught at Madison for a while. 2 years, I think. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
What did you teach?
I taught film history. And I know that doesn't line up with anything I did in the rest of my life, but it was the course that they needed somebody to teach. And so I said, sure, why not? I did wonder though, when I got to class, I found out I had like 27 teaching assistants. And I wasn't sure what the hell that meant. Well, what it turns out is the professor that I was replacing for the 2 years was one of these, celebrity star over the top professors. And so I walked into this is my first real class at the university level. And the class size was like, I think 3,500. Now I knew why I had 27 teaching assistants.
Wow,
3,500 students?
It gives new meaning to mass lecture.
Yeah, I get.
Oh, wow.
And this is before they could zoom in on their computers, right? So they're all there physically, right?
Oh, well, yeah. Of course, remember it was the 60s, so whether they were there or not, because we were all
Wow,
wow,
that's amazing. So was there a lot of money to be made in academia? Was that something you pursued?
A lot of money?
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering why you turned left out of being a college professor.
Well, I mean, frankly, in order to move up and have any influence on the direction of any institution, sometimes it means getting away from what you love. It's like artists who want to run companies and all of a sudden they're not on the boards or the computer anymore. And, I didn't have any desire to become a president of a university. And so I said goodbye.
Yeah. Interesting.
I'm back in the classroom though now in my declining years. So
yeah. Declining.
So Jack, you were recruited to Cincinnati to create a first opera program there?
Well, actually it was music. Yes. University, the CCM, the conservatory at the University of Cincinnati was the first musical theater program, degree granting musical theater program, in the world. Now, of course, there's a music theater program on every corner. But yeah, I was hired to come down and do that. And since it was the first, I couldn't possibly make any mistakes.
There you go.
All right. And then how did Taft Broadcasting come into the picture?
They decided that, well, in the 70s, I mean, when did Kings Island open? Roberto would remember this, the early 70s. There's an awful lot of live entertainment, Drop the Flag, singer dancers. David Blackburn started all this at Six Flags, probably in the late 60s. And so since there were a bunch of music theater kids that would rather sing and dance in the summer than work at McDonald's, we had a rather large live show programming at all of the Kings Island, Kings Dominion, Carowinds, Australia's Wonderland, etc. Employing several hundred singer dancers. So
wow.
That's sort of how that got going. Of course, that kind of massive live entertainment, which of course Opryland took to a whole different kind of level. It doesn't exist that much anymore.
Yeah, interesting. So
it's interesting because at that time a lot of those parks they established themselves through the live entertainment, kept them alive. I remember Magic Mountain in Valencia. In fact, it was failing at first, and then they brought in the live entertainment, and it brought the whole thing back to life. And it's true what you said. It's a shame because the live theater, live entertainment, a lot of the parks still have it, but it's not the same as it was then.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, and the world's changed, and let's face it, in the 70s we didn't have the entertainment options that we had.
Exactly,
I mean, nobody knew what streaming was. They thought that was something that a creek did through the hills of Wyoming.
Right.
And so by necessity, you have to respond to the environment that the audience is living in.
Yeah,
that's true.
So we all know Keith James, very highly respected gentleman who ended up buying JRA. We'll talk about that later. But is it true his mother was working for you around this time?
Well, she was the admin in what became the Opera Music Theater department, and yes, that's how I met Keith. With obviously, her son, and so and then decades and decades roll by. You have a picture somewhere of Keith and I on a motorcycle, and then and then another picture of Keith and I looking like corporate executives.
Right.
He always had those in his office, and they were titled something to the effect of, from easy rider fun to corporate bullshit.
You guys rode like 19,000 miles across the country.
Yeah, something like that. That's the corporate bullshit one.
There's the corporate bullshit. Okay.
There's an earlier one on our bikes.
Yeah.
It was easy rider fun.
Yeah.
But
so cool.
That doesn't matter.
There you are.
Wow, look at those sideburns. Man. Super cool.
I was younger and Keith had hair.
Wow. So then I guess in the 70s, the broadcast industry, or Taft Broadcasting, actually collapsed, and a group of people bought Kings Island or all the theme parks, or what happened there?
A group, well, the broadcasting industry was starting to change. Cable was coming in, traditional over-the-air broadcast, and the old rules of 7 a.m., 7 FM, 7 TV, that was all gone. And so a group of us did a leverage buyout of the theme park division in, hell, I don't even remember what it was, late 70s.
Oh, wow. Okay. And that became, did they change the name to?
Well, first it became Taft Attractions.
Oh, Taft Attractions.
And then when our little group bought it, it became King's Productions or King's Entertainment or something. Hell, I don't know. Roberta, you were almost around. Correct all my mistakes, for God's sake.
So then what was the mission to take, because I don't know if a lot of people know, Taft owned a lot of things, not only TV stations, radio stations, a bunch of theme parks, and IP. Too.
Yeah, they Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah, Hanna-Barbera.
Well, it went beyond that.
Yeah.
They also owned bowling alleys. Talk about wandering off mission.
Yeah.
Bowling alleys, a national company called KinderCare, which was one of the early drop your kids off in a learning environment experiences.
Oh, wow.
And something else, but it did wander off mission. But they stayed on that, and our little group took the park side of it.
Okay, so was the Hanna-Barbera IP part of the Parks division, or still part of Taft when you started rolling it out?
Well, Hanna-Barbera sort of came with the parks. I mean, in the beginning, Taft bought Coney Island, which is an old amusement park in the strictest sense of the word, on the Ohio River, which was not different than any other family amusement park through the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, except it was on the Ohio River and it flooded every year. So they bought that and for the management expertise, and because they knew they needed IP, they bought Hanna-Barbera.
Okay. So
did they do that very site was developed later into what became Wood Park?
Which the old
Coney Island.
No, Coney Island basically doesn't exist anymore. It has an amphitheater, which is the summer home of the Cincinnati Symphony, and we booked the usual Taylor Swift and whoever the hell's on the road.
Right.
But I had nothing to do with that.
What I loved as a big fan of Yogi Bear and all those IP is that you got to work on a Hanna-Barbera theme park in Texas that sadly was only open 2 summers. What? Tell us.
It was probably a concept whose time hadn't come and probably still hasn't. It was, it was a Hanna-Barbera theme park. It was maybe stretching IP. It was also in Spring, Texas, if you want to talk like a Texan.
Oh, right. Spring, Texas.
Which was not that far from Astroworld and Six Flags. Oh my gosh, I haven't seen that in a while. But it was open for a few years. Look, if you don't stumble and fuck up, was I allowed to swear on this? Okay.
Yeah, you're fine, Jack. Just be Jack.
If you don't fuck up along the way sometime, you're never going to learn anything.
Yeah.
Right.
So that was the big one. We just made sure that it was bright and colorful and had a damn rainbow over it.
Right. Which would have a different meaning nowadays.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
Yes, this was long before.
Yeah.
So what else did you put the IPs into? Any other products or experiences?
Well, I mean, through the years, because King's Productions, King's Attractions, Jack Rouse Associates, Jerry, we were all in the entertainment business. So, and we had the characters. And so, I think I've done, not me personally, but the firm has done the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade more times than I care to count. It was Bugs's birthday, or Fred Flintstone finally died, or Scooby-Doo married a cat or something. But I will say it's a remarkable experience to walk that parade route, from 82nd to 34. And my greatest memory of the parade doesn't have a damn thing to do with the parade. It has to do with the inflation of the balloons up on 82nd by the American Museum of Natural History, when all of these people in the overpriced condos on the Upper West Side bring their grills outside and their coolers full of beer and Coke, and you feel like you're in Columbus, Ohio, for God's sakes.
Wow. That's cool.
Reinforcing the fact that, come on, New York is nothing but a collection of neighborhoods. Just
of course.
That's true. So while you were at CCM, you met somebody who ended up being very influential in your life, a woman named Amy Merrill. Can you tell us?
Well, Amy was my business partner for many years. Unfortunately, she died very, very young. When we split off the theme park side and started JRA, she and I were the two that got that going. Later, Larry Wyatt worked there for a while. So did Bruce Robinson. Obviously, Keith did for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm.
But and I this is going to come out wrong, but I think both Amy and myself, we were sort of looking for something that was intellectually challenging. Not that Scooby's birthday is an intellectual challenge.
Or Scooby marrying a cat.
Yeah. Yeah, I made it. Well, Bill and Joe, God rest their souls, are gone, so they don't know I said that. And so that's what sort of started to ease us into the corporate world, the brand lands, and then of course the museums of conscience, history museums, science museums, all with that.
So why did you choose to call it Jack Rouse Associates if it was a partnership?
Because that was Amy's idea, and it was a stupid idea then, and God bless you, Amy, it's still a stupid idea.
So did you switch to just JRA at some point?
I think that was about the same time the Kentucky Fried Chicken became KFC.
Oh, right.
All right.
And we realized that if you put some initials in front of it, no one's going to know what the hell it was at the beginning. And that was just fine with me.
Right. Okay. So you started in the corporate world doing what, like corporate shows?
Oh yeah, we did. Who in this business hasn't done corporate events?
Yeah.
I think most of our clients then were Amy was the original tree hugger. So the fact that Shell Oil, Mobil Oil, Chevron were all of our clients,
wow,
did not go down well, but it paid the bills.
Yeah.
And subsequent years we didn't take.
So as somebody who runs a business, how did you get projects back then pre-internet? You know, how did you find clients?
We had a pretty good sales team, you know, and it's going to come out too egocentric, but the name started to catch on. You know, it didn't hurt that the Wall Street Journal had run an article. When was the last time the Wall Street Journal ran an article on some guy, the roller coaster guy?
Right. Wow.
They've moved on to either less significant or more significant subjects, depending on your political point of view.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's just marketing. We hired a first marketing guy was not from the industry. I sometimes think the best lessons in any sector are generally found in other sectors. And if you want somebody who can sell and understand brands, we have that in Cincinnati. It's called Procter & Gamble.
Yeah.
Right.
And they know how to sell and they know how to brand. So that was one of the original. It was to hire beyond what I think a lot of companies of mine, but you know, all the best sports ideas don't necessarily come from the world of sports. Although what does come from the world of sports is the NFL's, I think, most incredibly brilliant job of convincing every city in this country that had a Major League Football, the NFL team, that if they didn't build a new stadium, they were going to be a 10th rate city and we're going to sink from like the Phoenix and probably never come up again. And it worked in every damn city.
Wow.
Obviously, we did it in Cincinnati. We had nothing to do with that. But in the later years, we did, you know, with what's the one in Green Bay? The Green Bay Packers.
Yeah.
And Jerry, what's his name? Tribute to himself in Texas.
Yeah. Cool.
So those were cool. Now, obviously, we had nothing to do with the football game. We had to do because they all had museums, and you know, long before experiential was a word, they had experiences.
Yeah. So JRA started, I think, in like a 1,300 square foot office with you, Amy, a few writers, and a sales guy named Dale. Is that right?
Yeah, it was Dale and me and Amy and Scott and there were 5 of us.
Wow. Okay. And what other projects were you doing outside of corporate? How did you make the transition into?
Well, Brandlands came in. We were lucky enough to get hired by Volkswagen, who was building a Brandland, and Volkswagen AG, which of course is Volkswagen, Bentley, but you name it, like 8 or 9 marks. We were hired to do that in Wolfsburg, you know, Germany. So, and that was a multi-year project. Roberta, you know a lot of the people that worked over there on that one, and some of the rest of you may too. You know, our office was in Wolfsburg and Berlin during all those years. I've always avoided forgive me who I'm offending, the ego need sometimes to say, you know, Jack Rouse JRA offices is in, you know, Singapore, Berlin, Abu Dhabi, you know, who needs that shit? And we all know
guy
in
spaces.
Yeah. So Jack, did you think of Volkswagen as an IP or as a brand? And in your thinking, is there a difference? I mean, working with Scooby and the characters, that's an IP, but
Oh, no,
Volkswagen as a name.
no. This is where it varies. This is where the context of the country varies.
Okay.
You know, in Germany, which is of course car crazy, and given the fact that, you know, as World War II wound down, the only facility that the Allies spared in all of Germany was the Volkswagen plant.
Oh, wow.
Because the feeling was that, you know, when the war was over, they were going to have to rise from the ashes, and they needed a place to start rising from. And so consequently, Autostadt, which sounds beautiful in English until you realize it means car city, which sounds like a used car lot, you know, somewhere down in the valley. It's a brand. It's in that case, it's like P&G. It's a collection of brands. I mean, nobody confuses Crest with whatever the hell peanut butter they make at P&G. And likewise, Volkswagen had, you know, Volkswagen was the people's car. And it was interesting to see the country that, you know, obviously has a rather checkered past, to put it mildly, how willing they were to tell as honestly as I think they could, how the Germans had screwed it all up in the late 30s, you know, through the end of the Second World War.
Oh, wow.
That was one of the best learning experiences, to watch a country mature out of disaster and horror, and you know, one of the most horrific things that has ever happened in the world.
Yeah.
So, lesson learned there too.
Yeah. Wow.
What about Coca-Cola? You worked on the second iteration of World.
The second, yeah. Well, I guess, you know, every once in a while, I can't remember why they moved. And I think it had something to do with, they had an Olympics there, and it was sort of tied to that, because the old Coca-Cola was somewhere else, and then the new Coke was down closer to the Olympic Village. That was, you know, yeah, it was pretty typical of a brand land, you know, that they're just a big commercial to sell, you know, merchandise, although one could argue the same about theme parks, I'm sure. But they too have a rather interesting backstory, insofar as they are I never knew this until we did the project. They are the largest consumer of water on the planet.
Wow.
And consequently, their major philanthropic thrust is clean water in developing nations, you know, and they don't scream that from the rooftops to their, I sometimes think they should. But if you're going to use the most of it, I think it shows ultimate corporate responsibility to give back the problems that you frankly are helping to create to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Wow.
And what did you do for the Green Bay Packers?
Well, for any of the NFL teams, we had nothing to do with the field, but it had to do, you know, they wanted a Hall of Fame and they wanted a museum. I mean, Green Bay is unique, of course, because it's owned by the city. I do remember several of the early days, everybody was covering their stadiums by then, but the citizens who own the team vote no. We're Green Bay, goddammit, and we are going to sit out in the cold, and so are the people who come from Southern California.
So Jack, very, very different from football teams and Coca-Cola. Then you did the Underground Railroad Freedom Center.
Yeah, you got into museums. Tell us about that.
Well, that was, you know, there was a time, and many people on this call know this, that you know, serious cultural institutions, history museums, art museums, children's museums, science museums, we're starting to realize that just putting books on the wall and objects in cases was not enough anymore. And we sort of fell in to the what is called museums of conscience. The Underground Railroad ended in Cincinnati because once the slaves got through Kentucky and across the Ohio, they were in free country. And so the Freedom Center, the Underground Railroad, it tells that story. At the same time, it was telling the story, and this changes every few years, of oppressed populations all over the world. And God knows we got a lot of that going on now too.
Oh my God.
to try to find a better life, somewhere else.
Yeah.
And then we did several other museums of conscience at the same time. And at one point in the shop, we had, the Underground Railroad Freedom Center, which was in Cincinnati, the Muslim American Experience, which is in Dearborn, that at that time had the largest Muslim population, and then Mapping Our Tears for Hebrew Union College. And, you have 3 museums of conscience, and you start looking inside yourself to where the problems are. And you realize that that Michael Jackson was right. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and make the change. And that's still true. Sadly, it has to be still true.
Yeah. What did you discover about yourself in this experience?
Well, at the risk of offending maybe nobody or maybe everybody or part of the people on this call, there's a bit of white supremacy in Jack Rouse.
Wow.
It's the way I was brought up.
Yeah.
I'm not so sure it's not the way a lot of us were brought up.
Yeah.
Admitting it or not. And so that was, and then of course the whole Dubai Abu Dhabi thing, but those were hardly museums of conscience. Those were museums of conspicuous consumption. Yeah.
So around 2010, you got invited to look at Ferrari World. Now, we
had some work for Ferrari in Italy, but then the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi bought the controlling interest of Ferrari, and we won that bid. And I mean, they have an F1 track and more hotels than you can count, and a theme park, a Ferrari theme park, if you will. So that was the part we did, and I think it was our umpteenth trip back from Dubai or Abu Dhabi, where Amy and I decided it was time to sell. We probably picked up the phone in the Sky Club of Delta and said, "Hey, Keith, you want to buy a company?"
Wow.
That's how that worked.
Yeah.
And it didn't have much more conversation than that.
Well, tell us a little bit about the park, because it seems like there was nothing there back then, right? I think you said 40 years ago it was Bedouins and
tents. Well, 40 years ago, that part of the world was Bedouins and tents.
Yeah. So how it just seems odd to me that suddenly a Ferrari theme park from Italy is coming out to the middle of the desert. What?
Well, you got to remember that most of these facilities are not desert anymore. By rule, king rule, whatever, whichever emirate you're in.
Right.
And it's becoming true now for Saudi Arabia too, that the first thing you have to do is build multiple desalination plants. And those are not cheap. A couple of those cost more than any theme park anyone's ever worked on.
Wow.
Problem becomes, from an environmental standpoint, is that salt ends up being put on the shore, which means it eventually seeps back into the sea and changes the whole ecology. Then that's too much information, I know. But
no.
It's one of the interesting infrastructure problems that we really don't have that much in countries that aren't deserts.
Yeah. But so how did you go about developing a park for that region where it's so hot and humid, and they had no history with sports cars or anything,
or in theme parks,
theme parks?
Yeah. I mean, so you were
well, look. Remember what part of the country is and how it's ruled. I mean, lovely people. I mean, great friends still over there. But if the Crown Prince wants to do it, and money is no object, and it never is over there, then it gets done. And I guess we pitched it well.
Had JRA done other theme parks from scratch like that before? Mostly the brand?
No, I mean, once we got out of, well, that's not true. And I can't remember whether this was under the banner of Taft Attractions or King's Productions or JRA. We did have Lego as a client for many years.
Oh, right.
Wow.
The first one we did, and this was cool because it's another. My basic philosophy is for many projects, if you don't learn something about the world and how it works from your client, then you haven't taken advantage. Yeah, sure, you got the money, right. But I think taking the money and run is not always the most important. God knows that I'm not a dummy. It is important. But what we learned from Lego, I think they sent about a half a dozen of us over there to basically understand that Lego is not a toy. Lego is a learning experience. And to this day, I'm told in many structural engineering classes, the Legos are used, as a basic device to show the transfer of weight between various beams and
yeah.
You technical people know the drill of that.
Yeah.
And so that was just fascinating, although I can think of other things to do for 4 days than live in Denmark.
Yeah.
But it was a hell of a learning experience.
Wow. Yeah. So did you guys develop the first Legoland theme park?
Well, well, no, they had a little, probably of any size. Yeah. And then then we sort of got out of it. Now, isn't there one down in somewhere near San Diego now?
Yeah.
And they're all over the country. I mean, doing repeats, whether we were asked to or not, sometimes better to move on to something else. And about that same time, Hanna-Barbera had acquired Peo, the Smurfs. And so the little blue people started to enter the catalog of IP that we had. And in those days, now I don't know if the Smurfs are even recognized by anybody anymore. But it was I think many of you on the call would admit, it was a significant brand at one time.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Where did you end up putting the Smurf experiences?
Anybody who wanted them.
They like blue, you got the Smurf.
Wow.
Well, so Jack, it seems like the diversity of your audiences. You think about a theme park with Hanna-Barbera brands, sports with Green Bay Packers, Coke, then getting into these museums of the consciousness and all this. The need to know the audience. We talked the other day, and I love what you were talking about when you said, how you thought about the audience and how you listened to the audience. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Well, just briefly, of course, when you're making a pitch, the audience is the people to whom you're pitching.
Right.
I think there is a tendency sometimes for all of us to, okay, we got 1 hour and we got to take our example and we got to tell them how great JRA is. We never really did that. And I think Amy and I both led the charge on this. We just wanted to shut up and listen, because it's one thing to have solutions that you think are cool and entertaining. It's another thing to have solutions that answers the need of the client. And the only way you know that is to shut the fuck up and listen. That is sometimes difficult for all of us in this business. Witness the fact that I've been talking for a damn hour. To listen, it's not that funny, Roberta. And so I think, but that's still, I'm back in the classroom again, as some of you know. But the first year students, I'm not interested in them knowing what I have done with my life. I'm interested in knowing what they believe about themselves and what they believe about the profession they think they're going into. So it's reading the audience. I think it's a much easier thing to say than it is to do at times for all of us.
Yeah.
So 2009, you sold JRA to Keith James. And then after all those years, what did you do after you walked away?
Well, I didn't move into a rest home and start playing canasta and bridge.
Good.
No, I got back into the things, I still motorcycled for a while. And in fact, I guess everybody on this call knows Monty. Monty and I would motorcycle, for years. He'd fly to Colorado. I had a couple bikes out there. We'd ride around. That's over. Monty's still young enough to ride. Jack's not.
Monty doesn't age.
Yeah, that's fucking disgusting too.
Yeah, I did, right. I would know history. Sign that pact with the devil, I guess.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But eventually I went back to the classroom. I teach in the graduate school of the arts at Columbia. and I tutor third grade reading at a very underserved inner city school here in Cincinnati.
Wow.
And so I got two extremes.
Yeah, very much so.
Those who had nothing in their lives, and those are trust fund, but nothing wrong with being a trust fund kid, unless you wear it on your sleeve for your entire life.
Yeah. So they called you to work out in Columbia and New York City for 1 year. You made a commitment.
Yeah, they said, yeah, will you take it for a year? And I said, oh yeah, well, that was 13 years ago and I'm still there.
Wow.
But that's because I'm still learning,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an amazing.
I'm off there again on Tuesday,
Wow.
Yeah.
And
it's exciting.
Is that where you're teaching leadership?
It's leadership and ethics in the Graduate School of the Arts. These are all people who want to be in the business side of theater, the business side of theme parks, maybe. Certainly the business side of opera and ballet and large orchestras. There's an awful lot of people behind the scenes in the serious music business. Forget Broadway because that's either serious or not, depending on the show. But in the Class A symphonies in this country and around the world, and likewise ballets and opera companies, most of those people have some experience in production management, in regional theaters, or in Broadway. It's just, it's a good place to cut your teeth because, frankly, if you majored in Mozart and Beethoven and the boys, that doesn't teach you a hell of a lot about how to team build an orchestra, or an opera company.
Right. So what's your general theory, if you could sum it up, of leadership?
Oh God, volumes have been written on this, as we all know.
Well, you talked about some people think, I come into a company and I want to run it my way. Is that the way to do it?
Well, except in the fact that it's a leading question. Hell no. I think in this industry too, I keep talking about the industries I was still in it, which of course I'm not.
Yeah.
But it's still about building teams who come together on common goals and common beliefs.
Right.
And are not obsessed with the idea of, my concept is better than your concept, and worse than to have that play out in front of the client. And so it's about team building. And it's also about adaptable capacity. The ability to dance between the raindrops, because if you're running any organization, you better have a lot of umbrellas, because your job is to make sure that your team doesn't get wet. Forget you, because nobody hired you, they hired the entity. Now everybody doesn't believe that they never hired you, but that's a whole different other story too.
Okay.
Well, a moment ago you were talking about curiosity, and when we talked the other day, I thought you had some interesting things to say about, was particularly that there's always unanswered questions.
Yeah.
And that's keep you.
And that's why you read a lot, right? You said you read.
Well, yeah, I read a lot because nobody wants to talk to me. But if you sit for a minute and think about it, there's a guy named Walter Isaacson who's a fairly famous author of biographies on many people, including Jobs. I think he just finished one on Musk. He's done them on Johnson, et cetera, et cetera.
Da Vinci.
And the book on Da Vinci, which I use, not the whole book, because Walter never met a short story.
Right.
Is all about the importance of being endlessly curious. He tells the story, the last page of the book, which resonates with me, and frankly, it resonates with the classes through the years, is about a woodpecker. And no point in going into it now, but because Leonardo is, use first name, oh God, Jack knew Leonardo, not that old. The curiosity factor is essential, I think, to growing and to learning. As you get older, I don't know how old the average age is on this call, but it's certainly true. As you get older, the opportunity to calcify is huge. And the only way to avoid that, you know, is to get out of your own cohort, you know, is to constantly be curious about the world around you. One of the gurus in the 70s and 80s of leadership was a guy named Warren Bennis. And the last book he ever wrote, after writing dozens and dozens of 200-page tomes on what is leadership, published his last book, and it was called Still Surprised. And I always think that we use this book in class too. If you can live every day of your life and still be surprised at something, both positive and negative, you know, it's been a pretty cool day.
Yeah. No doubt that made you successful. When I look at the diversity of the kinds of things that you did, I mean, if you came at them with a curious mind, you know, then as you said earlier about listening to your audience or listening to the client, I think that's a key attribute. I know for myself, I always felt, in fact, I would say to my wife, I would just slip up and say I wasn't going to work, I was going to school. I actually said that I'm going to school, because everything you took on, and a lot of what we do in this industry is, you know, prototypical, you know, it hasn't been done before, or the subject that you're going to be involved with. And to me, you know, that's the thing that, you know, that draws you into it. And then if you're interested, you know, you're going to get your team interested, and then hopefully your audience.
And you get a passion for it.
Yeah,
that's important too.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. I will say there is nothing more satisfying at my age. The seminar I teach with another gentleman, it's 3 hours. That's a long time.
Wow.
But Michael and I have worked together for some years, and so we've got this. I always say we've got this vaudeville act masquerading as a graduate seminar in an overpriced school in the most overpriced city on the planet. But I'll tell you one thing: when I leave 116th Street, you know, with my backpack, I'm on my notes, and there's a bounce in my step. Yes, even at my age, still, you know, and take the subway down to where we live. I think this is a cool way to live.
Wow.
It doesn't have anything to do with the industry that we're talking about, except it has everything to do with the industry we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You travel a lot too? You explore other places?
Well, I fly to New York 30 times a year, but that's a short flight from Cincinnati.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't go to Europe or Africa?
No, my idea of hell is a long haul flight.
All right, good to know. Well, I know it's very important to you about the third graders that you tutor. Tell us how you got into that.
Oh, I think like most things, somebody asked you if you would do them a favor, and I said, sure, I'll tutor. I didn't know how to tutor. I mean, having taught college doesn't have a damn thing to do with how you tutor.
Right.
Oh, really? Okay.
Underserved kids.
Yeah.
And
third grade.
Again, this is another one where, you know, 10 years ago, a buddy of mine asked me to do it, and I'm still doing it. I mean, the Columbia gig is intellectually satisfying, and sometimes emotionally too. But the underserved kids gig, and you know, thank God for science museums and children's museums. And by the way, as every not-for-profit cultural organization, you know, struggles to find the new audience and what's going to be the secret sauce to get them back again, I often point out that the best example of naming an organization are children's museums, because they have the title of the audience in their title. And that's a lot different than saying the Los Angeles Philharmonic at the Hollywood Bowl. Okay, yeah, that has a certain panache to a certain audience constituent, but it's not quite the same thing. So I think that trying to understand how cultural institutions, and frankly, that's what most of my wife and I pro bono work is now, is trying to serve those areas, mostly in the theater and the classical music world.
Yeah. So tell us some of the boards that you're on now, because I know you're so philanthropic and get involved in so many things out there.
it's Cincinnati, Ohio. It's pretty easy to get involved. Plus, the price of entry to the Cincinnati Symphony Orchestra is not 200 and some odd thousand the way it is to New York Phil. And that's a barrier to a lot of people, including me.
Yeah.
But I think that, I mean, what the Artsway, the zoo, the Playhouse, the Symphony, a little theater out in Colorado.
Wow.
It's narrowed down a bit.
Yeah.
I end up on search committees a lot, but if you're ever on a board, get on a search committee, because by definition, you put yourself out of business. The finance committee never goes out of business. Marketing never goes out of business.
Yeah.
You get on a search and then move on from there.
Yeah.
I just one quick, if you don't mind, short story about one of my 9-year-old kids. When you first start tutoring reading, or tutoring anything, I guess, Hispanic brown guy, 9 years old, and you try to, your first say, what do you do in your spare time? Do you play video games? Do you play football? What do you do? No, Mr. Jack, no, I don't have time for any of that. And I said, well, Jose, what do you do? He said, well, I'm teaching my parents English. Okay, now this is 9 years old.
Yeah.
Years later, because it's a K through 12 school, I see him in the hall, and I think he's probably ready to graduate. Mr. Jack, my parents are citizens. They passed the test.
Wow.
Because a 9-year-old kid took his spare time. So don't talk to me about generations that are sinking. Yeah, there's a lot of negativity about younger generation, but not this guy, because he taught them English. I went home and looked up the citizenship test. I'd flunked the fucking thing, and I bet everyone in the hall would too.
Wow.
Wow.
Give it a look. It's a very humbling experience.
Wow.
And that makes me smile a lot.
Yeah, that's great.
Sorry, that was a tangent about nothing.
No,
Important. So where do you think we are in the state of the arts now? Are we pricing people out of theme parks, out of symphonies, out of theater? And what do we do about that so that younger people get into it like we all did?
Well, I think, we all got into it at a time when there weren't that many choices. I mean, the constants have always been leisure, to me, have always been leisure time and disposable income.
Right.
But where that income goes and where that time is placed now, I mean, if you just take the classical music world, everything's streaming. Why the hell would you fight the traffic to go to Lincoln Center when that same night, the same damn concert is streaming on something, and you can get it at home? This is a huge issue. And it's even a bigger issue. This is going to sound like a snarky remark, but it's true. The bigger issue is the money that these organizations leave on the table because there are no bar sales. And don't underestimate. Have you ever bought a drink in a Broadway theater? $40 for that much wine?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
The same is true in the classical music world.
Right.
That you've got to figure out, yes, we want to distribute it, we want everybody to experience, but we also got to pay for it.
Yeah.
So, how do we do that? I guess you could argue that, the New York Philharmonic could start making its own wine or beer or something.
So, Jack, do you think that the pandemic actually helped maybe to drive people back to live experiences? For 2 years we were.
No, I think, well, maybe that was too glib on my part. I think what the pandemic did more than anything is gave people time to think about what's really important to them. Many friends throughout the country, a generation below me, who've realized that, no, we've got kids. Both of us don't have to work. Let's figure out a way to do this and have sort of a balanced life. I think, I don't know what the secret is for the business that you guys are in and that I used to be in, but how can that translate into a balanced life somehow? And I think that because there's so many options out there now, it just becomes increasingly difficult. one thing, at least and again, we're so far off theme parks, I'm sorry, is that, nobody wants to sit through a 2.5-hour concert anymore. I don't know any major orchestra in this country, and I'm proud of the fact that we started here 90 minutes, period.
Now, the one challenge I have with that, because I go to the Hollywood Bowl, it takes me an hour to get there in traffic. I've got to stack park and pay $30 for that privilege. We bring a picnic, we get in our seats, we're looking forward to a long evening. And if it's only 90 minutes, sometimes I feel a little ripped off.
Well, you're not the only one. I mean, we hear that. But remember, it's unusual to get from wherever you live in California to the Hollywood Bowl. That's not even the same in Manhattan.
Yeah, right. That's true.
Hell, you can get from the Upper East Side to Lincoln Center in 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's geography plays a lot into this.
Yeah, that's true.
No, I do not have any answers for what the future is.
Yeah.
Other than that, I have no rear view mirror, and while this has been great fun to look back, it's not where I choose to live.
Yeah.
Well, it's because you're curious.
Yeah.
Curious people, but you're looking for the new thing.
Right. Well, what do you think about VR, augmented reality? Do you think all that's going to play a part?
If I knew enough about it, I'd have opinion about it. I don't.
Okay.
I mean, I know what the average person on the street knows.
Yeah. Okay. So, Jack, with all your wisdom and all these decades of experience and all these different disciplines you've had the opportunity to work in, is there something out there that you think makes an experience timely, relevant, vibrant, and in the zeitgeist, and timeless, touching, emotional, and something that'll last as a memory?
I've never thought of that about my instinct is to say I'm not so sure that anything entertainment in the broadest sense of the word is timeless. I know in the Hebrew Union, the mapping our tears, the Jewish experience, that's changed several times through the years. Some of it we worked on, JRA worked on, some of it somebody else did. And it's largely because the context in which it is viewed. I mean, you can't, the context that the guest has for what the Holocaust was is a hell of a lot different in 2022 than it was in 1953. And I think there's a thing called contextual intelligence too, which is what is the time frame that this lives in? Are there certain things that'll live forever? Sure, but those are tourist attractions. I mean, the Gray Line's always going to take that great boat around the island, in Manhattan, and the Statue of Liberty. I suspect those will always be timeless, but those are only timeless in, I think, heavy tourist areas. And the vast majority of the people do not live in Manhattan, or for that matter, in heavy tourist areas.
Yeah. That's interesting. So it's more the time, the perspective that the guest is in that determines whether it's timely or timeless versus the
what they're bringing. Interesting.
That's fascinating.
Well, and that's I've last soapbox, I promise. I mean, we all know there's intellectual intelligence, your IQ. Everybody knows what emotional intelligence is. Take Myers-Briggs 20 times and then go figure that one out.
Right.
But the part that's often missing is, I think, contextual intelligence, and that's reading the room. Which is why I still think the best thing to do in a class or when pitching a client is shut up and listen to the client.
Yeah.
Before you put your foot in the mouth and suggest something they hate.
Right. Is that what you think in your career made you successful and JRA successful, that you listened?
Well, I probably played a part, but don't ever underestimate the importance of luck and being in the right place at the right time.
You don't need to be so humble because you're amazing.
No, I'm not being humble. It's true. It's true.
But you've talked today. I think one of my major takeaways from listening to you is to respect people and listen to people. And
isn't that make sense? Because we want ultimately we want to respect and listen to the audience, and that comes through the mouthpiece of the client many times. So either that or I mean, every Legoland looks like every other Legoland in the world. But most people who go to, where's the ones? Is it south of San Diego or north of San Diego?
North of San Diego.
Yeah, Escondido.
Carlsbad? Yeah. That looks a hell of a lot different than the one in Windsor, England.
Okay.
Not in terms of what it looks like.
Right.
But it looks like in terms of what the audience composition is. You know?
Right.
Yeah.
I suspect people who go to Carlsbad are not the same ones that are flocking to Windsor.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
Wow.
Well,
Jack, what
what wisdom.
So different from so many of the other people we've talked to in this industry.
Yeah.
In that, you were breaking ground, with so many things, but using your insights into the human condition and your intelligence to kind of,
Well, thank you. Thank you. I've been blessed. No question about that.
Yeah. And it's awesome. You were out in, I don't want to say the middle of nowhere, but you weren't in LA, you weren't in Orlando in terms of the experience design industry.
Are you calling Billings, Montana, the middle of nowhere?
I think that's what you call it.
Yeah,
but I can. I live there.
Right.
Ryan doesn't know what he's talking
there were
about.
non-existent opportunities.
Well, thanks
you,
again,
Jack.
This was
You're awesome.
great.
Sure thing.
Joe and I, let's go to another concert.
Let's go.
Let's go find something to do.
Yeah, okay.
All right. Well, thank you, Jack. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you in the future. Take care.
Remember to give me a call sometime.
Don't go anywhere.
I'm not going anywhere.
All right, guys, thank you so much for joining us here on the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. We hope you enjoyed the ride. And thank you, Jack Rouse, for time traveling with us today. If you have questions for Jack, stick around for our live Q&A in just 60 seconds. On behalf of Zeitgeist Design and Production, we thank you for spending an hour of your time with us on the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. If you enjoyed the journey, please check out all 28 of our time travel adventures on our YouTube channel or under the Zoomcast section at zeitgeist-usa.com. They're also available as a podcast wherever you listen. Set your clocks now for Friday, October 20th, when our time travel passenger will be the director of the Disney animated classic, Oliver and Company, the creator of such attractions as Mickey's Philharmonic Magic, I said that wrong, Mickey's Philharmagic, and the official fine artist of the Panama Canal expansion, Mr. George Scribner. Until then, may your tomorrow have the nostalgia of the past, the wonder of the present, and the promise of the future.
Get it.